What if Master Yoda was discharged from the psych ward? What would happen then? So, in this timeline, Obi-Wan Kenobi has harbored an intense hatred for Anakin Skywalker since the moment Qui-Gon dragged the boy into their lives. Forced to train Anakin after Qui-Gon's death, Obi-Wan had spent years orchestrating accidents, hoping to be rid of what he viewed as his curse. When Senator Amidala faced assassination attempts, Obi-Wan manipulated the situation to send Anakin away with her, secretly hoping they'd both perish. He despised them both, Anakin for existing and Padme for being, as he called her, half human, half politician, a species he loathed. Meanwhile, Padme recognized Obi-Wan's loathing immediately, seeing how the Jedi Master was trying to get Anakin killed. This triggered memories of Mumphy, her old pet, who had tragically died after falling into a grass processor. Looking at Anakin, she saw the same innocent, loyal nature that would lead him to destruction if left with Obi-Wan, like Mumphy leaping to her death. The Mumphy analogy accelerated their relationship. Separately, she reasoned that assassins would expect her on Naboo, so she suggested they find somewhere forgotten that screamed, "Dead End." Anakin immediately suggested Tatooine to visit his mother. This decision allowed them to rescue Shmi from Tusken Raiders before she could be critically injured. As Anakin and Padme tended to Shmi on Tatooine, Obi-Wan began his investigations at the Jedi Temple, and that is where we pick up this story. Let's begin. Still riding the high of what he'd internally classified as Operation Finally Unburdened, Obi-Wan Kenobi had begun his assigned investigation with the brisk smugness of a man who believed the Force had finally paid him back for a decade of agony. With Anakin gone and the galaxy momentarily tolerable, Obi-Wan wandered the neon-slick underbelly of Coruscant in search of answers and spice-scented calf. His first stop was Dexter Jetster's Diner, officially a culinary establishment. Unofficially, a front for mid-grade spice distribution, low-tier arms trafficking, and galactic-scale gossip. Dexter ran the place like a hut in an apron, flipping hash browns and laundering credits in the same motion. "Kaminoan," Dex muttered, studying the dart. Long-necked cloners, outer rim, rainy hellhole. Obi-Wan frowned, turning the dart between his fingers. The bounty hunter who'd fired it had escaped. A disappointment, but not his greatest one. Far more frustrating was Anakin's continued existence, despite Obi-Wan deliberately abandoning him in that nightclub, hoping the assassin would kill him. The boy simply refused to die. "Coordinates?" Obi-Wan asked, pushing away his bitter thoughts. Dex shrugged. "You're the Jedi, you figure it out." Back at the temple, Obi-Wan headed for the archives to locate Kamino on the star charts, but before he could reach the terminal, he was intercepted by Mace Windu. "We need to talk," Mace said grimly. Obi-Wan felt his stomach tighten with anticipation. "Anakin?" A flash of hope surged through him. Perhaps news had arrived that the curse had finally met his end, along with the Senator. "No, Obi-Wan. Yoda." The hope dissolved, leaving Obi-Wan's disappointment raw and unmasked. Mace sighed. "Master Yoda's been discharged from the psych ward." Obi-Wan blinked. "Discharged? You mean he's not cured, just..." "They've run out of things to try," Mace explained, fatigue etching deep lines around his eyes. "And since there is no try, only do..." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "The medical droids did everything they could do. Now they've discharged him and he's our problem again." Obi-Wan rubbed his temple. "And what does that have to do with me?" Mace hesitated before continuing. "The med droids suggested maybe taking him off-world could help. Change of scenery. And since you're already on a mission, you want to send Yoda with me?" Mace nodded. "Not just you. Me and some of the council will join. You know as well as I do, one Jedi alone can't manage him anymore. Last time Kit Fisto tried, we lost 3 fountains and a meditation garden." Obi-Wan accepted his fate, and so it began. Soon Obi-Wan and a small contingent, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shak-Ti, and Kit Fisto, huddled around an archive terminal. They clustered together like younglings attempting to play a smuggled hologame on the same device, shoulders pressed against one another, chairs squeaking as they jostled for position. "Move your head, Master Mundi," Shak-Ti said. "I can't see." "Just click there, Obi-Wan," Kit Fisto pointed, the tip of his finger leaving a smudge on the screen. "Don't touch it, Master," Mace snapped. "I do not wish to endure Jocasta's lecture." The warning wasn't hyperbole. At least 3 Jedi had fallen to the dark side in the previous year, alone, following extended interactions with the archive's custodian. Her 4-hour dissertations on proper terminal handling procedures had proven more effective at cultivating hatred than any Sith teaching. After several minutes of bickering over navigation protocols, they accessed the star charts. Kamino wasn't there, not listed, not even a whisper. With collective sighs of annoyance, they summoned Jocasta Nu. Jocasta knew approached with the imperious stride of someone who believed knowledge was power, and she controlled all of it. "Yes, masters?" she asked, her tone failing to conceal her condescension. "We need to locate a system," Mace explained. "Camino." Jocasta accessed the terminal. After a moment, she stepped back, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "If it's not in the archives," she said icily, "it doesn't exist." "Perhaps it's been deleted," suggested Kit Fisto, inclining his head toward the terminal. "We must search the trash folders," Shaak Ti said, reaching for the controls. She brushed aside Obi-Wan's hand and clicked on the trash folder icon. The terminal immediately flashed red, displaying "Administrator access required." "That's restricted," Jocasta said, with a satisfied smile. "Council authorization required, and only I can provide the necessary access codes." Mace's expression soured. "We are the Council." "I need the access request in writing," Jocasta replied. Mace tore a sheet of flimsy from a nearby notepad, scrawled out the authorization request in his precise handwriting, and passed it around. Each council member affixed their signature with visible irritation. Obi-Wan drummed his fingers on the terminal edge as he waited, seated beside them, but unable to contribute a council signature of his own. Jocasta examined the document. "This is only 5 signatures. I need all 12. Shaak Ti rose from her seat, looming over the librarian. "You have 2 options. Give us access now, or we can produce 12 copies on high-grade pergamen, have every council member sign them, and then I'll personally shove each one down your throat before we dispose of your remains in the temple spice incinerator and appoint a more cooperative librarian." Reluctantly, Jocasta granted access and walked away with remarkable speed for someone of her age. "We should have eliminated her years ago," Shaak Ti remarked, sliding back into her seat. "Calm yourself, Master T," Mace said flatly. "It's far too difficult to cover up a murder in here." They accessed the deleted folders and initiated a search algorithm for Camino. The search turned up a surprising number of recently deleted queries for certain establishments in the Outer Rim, planets known more for their entertainment options than their academic interest. "Fascinating research priorities," Fisto murmured with a knowing glance at his colleagues. The search algorithm began running through deleted archives, a progress bar indicating it would take several minutes to complete. As they waited for results, Kit turned to Obi-Wan. "How's dear Anakin doing on his first solo mission, Obi-Wan?" Obi-Wan's expression darkened with contempt. "Hopefully they both die a quick death. Anakin is incapable of anything requiring intelligence." Ki-Adi-Mundi frowned. "That's not true. He assisted me with decrypting those pirate transmissions last month. His technical skills are exceptional, as are his skills with the flamethrower." "Luck," Obi-Wan dismissed with a wave. "The only thing Anakin's good for is serving as a training dummy. I've had him suspended in a sack so the younglings could practice their kicks." "You treat him too harshly," Mace said. Obi-Wan shrugged. "Perhaps I should make his training more challenging, tie him up and stomp his head until he loses consciousness, then continue kicking." "If you hated him so much," Dee interjected, "you could have simply informed the council. Any of us would have gladly trained Anakin. The boy has a heart of a rhodium." "Ah, but then Obi-Wan wouldn't receive the monthly Padawan credit allowance," Mace pointed out. "That's not it," Obi-Wan protested. "No one wanted him." "Did you ask anyone?" Fisto challenged. Obi-Wan opened his mouth, then closed it. "The Force told me." Mace placed a hand on Obi-Wan's shoulder. "If the Force is speaking to you in such specific terms, perhaps you should join Yoda in the Psych ward. That's how it started for him." Mace's shoulders dropped momentarily. He then continued, "This is partially my fault. I should never have allowed Qui-Gon to keep you as an apprentice while sending you on solo missions. Also, he could collect the monthly Padawan credits without doing any actual work. But that's no excuse to mistreat Anakin." Before Obi-Wan could respond, the terminal chimed. Results. Within minutes, the deletion logs were uncovered. Camino, deleted under the access code of Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas. Problem was, Sifo-Dyas had been missing, presumed dead at the time. They reviewed security footage from the specific terminal where the deletion occurred, pinpointing the exact timestamp. The grainy holofeed revealed a tall, elegant figure with a distinctive swept-back hairline and meticulously trimmed beard. Count Dooku. The council members exchanged glances, recognition dawning on their faces. "So, he's involved in this," Mace said as he studied the image. Kit Fisto's tentacles twitched. "The question is why?" Mace tapped his fingers against the terminal edge. "We'll know more when we reach Camino." The council members worked quickly to restore the deleted data on Camino. As the system regenerated the missing coordinates, a holographic star map materialized before them, revealing a planet in a section of the Outer Rim previously thought empty. Obi-Wan straightened his posture. "We have a location. Let's go." Mace nodded. "Time to fetch Yoda." They made their way through the temple corridors, other Jedi giving them a wide berth as they passed. The journey to Yoda's chambers felt longer than usual, each step weighted with apprehension. "Prepare yourselves," Mace warned as they approached the reinforced doors. Yoda's disappearance had shaken the Order to its core. 6 months earlier, the Ancient Master had claimed to be receiving messages from beyond the Force and vanished without warning. Search parties scoured the galaxy. Many presumed him dead. Mace had been days away from assuming the title of Grand Master when reports came in of a strange figure in massive armor wandering the ruins of an ancient temple on Dantooine. The figure they'd recovered barely resembled their former master. Encased in 10 feet of blue-painted battle armor adorned with gold trim and incomprehensible symbols, Yoda's tiny green head peered out from the massive construct like an afterthought. The armor seemed fused to his body, wires and tubes penetrating his flesh, connecting to who knew what beneath the metal plates. He'd babbled endlessly about archmagos, an emperor, tech priests, and some entity called the Omnissiah. His rants included references to machine spirits, sacred litanies, and countless other incomprehensible terms. The council had finally convinced him to enter the Psych ward by telling him the Primarch had ordered it, a term they'd plucked from his ravings that seemed to hold authority in his broken mind. Now he was out, uncured, uncontrolled. The medical staff had simply given up. "Let me take the lead," Mace instructed as they entered his chambers cautiously. Yoda sat cross-legged in the center of the chamber. A semicircle of ritual candles flickered before him, their flames reflecting off the fractured screen of a broken holoprojector he appeared to be addressing as a sacred object. The shoulder plates bearing the mark Ultra in high galactic script rose and fell slightly with each breath. His helmet rested on a small pedestal beside him, its fearsome visage facing the makeshift shrine. A weapon that appeared to be a sword with mechanized, rotating teeth leaned against the wall, while what looked like an oversized pistol remained holstered at his side. The physical transformation was disturbing enough, but his mind had deteriorated far beyond the cybernetic interface. He no longer referred to himself as Master Yoda. He preferred Brother Yoda. "Only one master the galaxy has," he had declared during one of his more lucid moments in the Psych ward. "The master of mankind." They roused him with difficulty. His eyes snapped open. "By the light of the Omnissiah, awaken I do. Spoken the litany of ignition must be. Before enter the hall of duty we can." Mace blinked. "Brother Yoda, the chapter master has issued orders. Kamino, your battle brothers require your presence." Yoda nodded solemnly. "Courage and honor. For the Emperor and Gilliman, fight I will. Follow the Codex Astartes, I must." Obi-Wan groaned softly, his expression twisted with confusion. The council members simply stared ahead, faces impassive, but eyes hollow with exhaustion. Unlike Obi-Wan, they had endured months of Yoda's incomprehensible ravings on a daily basis, their patience worn to breaking point. They soon departed for Kamino. Yoda barked litanies at every electronic device activated during the journey, even the refresher unit. "By sacred rites of purification, by prayer of the blessed flush, cleanse this chamber of mortal waste. May the waters cycle through the sacred pipes, carrying impurity to the depths below. May the bowl shine with the Emperor's light, free from stain and taint. May the handle be turned with reverence, for it is the lever that separates civilization from barbarism. Let no man neglect this duty, for in cleanliness we find godliness. So saith the machine spirit of the aqua sanctum." He had recited this entire litany to Ki-Adi-Mundi after hearing the master flush the refresher without proper invocation. While Ki-Adi stood frozen in shocked silence, the other council members had quietly filed out of the room, each privately wishing they could become one with the Force rather than endure another minute of Yoda's theology. Eventually, Mace had to sedate him with a specialized hypo-injector the medical droids had provided for emergencies. Upon arrival at Kamino, rain lashing down in silver sheets, Brother Yoda awoke from sedation with startling alertness. "The sacred rain," he intoned, "blessed by the machine god." The Jedi and Brother Yoda were received by Lama Su, who maintained impressive composure despite the armored behemoth in their midst. As they toured the facility, Yoda's heavy footsteps shook the pristine floors, leaving dents in the polished surface. When they reached Jango Fett's quarters, they encountered an unexpected problem. The door was too small for Yoda's massive armored form. Without hesitation, Yoda activated his chainsword and carved a Yoda-sized hole through the wall beside the door, metal and plascrete collapsing inward. The entire group, Jedi, Kaminoan, and armored former Grand Master, entered Jango's quarters through this improvised entrance. Taunwi studied Yoda with clinical interest, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding any fear of the destructive display. Jango took one look at the assemblage and knew he was criffed. They asked if he'd been to Coruscant recently. Possibly, he said. Mundi spotted Mandalorian armor behind a door. Mace force-pulled it across the room and crushed it mid-air with a gesture. You think your bones are tougher than Beskar alloy? He asked, voice calm. Jango swallowed. Yoda stepped forward. Speak, heretic, or to dust you shall be reduced by litany of disintegration. Well, Jango began. Maybe I don't feel like talking right now, he countered, the hollow bravado in his voice betraying his actual position. Mandalorian culture had embedded in him an unshakable need to project strength in the face of threat. A reflex so deeply ingrained that even surrounded by Jedi Masters and a combat-crazed Yoda, he defaulted to posturing. Tonwi leaned toward him. They are threatening to kill you, Jango, she translated slowly, as if explaining a simple concept to a particularly dim child. Her tone carried the weary patience of a scientist forced to repeatedly explain obvious conclusions to lesser species. I know that, Jango snapped, glaring at her. I'm not stupid. Tonwi responded, the sound somehow conveying profound doubt. Jango looked at Boba, who stood wide-eyed in the corner. Fine, I'll explain everything, he conceded. I was hired by a man named Tyrannus to both become the clone template about 10 years ago, and more recently to try and take out that senator. Tall guy. Beard, dark cloak, he said. The Jedi looked at one another, confirming what they already suspected. Mace activated a small hollow projector. Dooku's stern face materialized in blue light. Is this him? Obi-Wan asked. Jango nodded slowly. Yeah, that's him. Shaak Ti's eyes narrowed. You didn't recognize this Tyrannus as Count Dooku? He's one of the most prominent political figures in the galaxy. Jango shrugged. I'm a simple man. Don't follow the news. Most of it's just dramatized bantha fodder anyway. The Masters nodded, accepting his explanation. The bounty hunter wasn't lying. The Holonet news feeds had become increasingly filled with clickbait and sensationalism over the past decade, designed more to capture attention than inform. Tonwi's elongated neck stiffened as realization struck. Oh, we have been in contact with Tyrannus all along. We assumed he was a Jedi. We've been deceived. The Jedi turned their attention to the Kaminoan. He provided behavioral chips for the clones, she continued. Said they'd ensure the soldiers followed any order. How did you not make the connection between this Jedi Tyrannus and Count Dooku? Kit Fisto asked facepalming. He always wore a hood during our communications. We didn't question it, she stated matter-of-factly. We assumed it was some sort of Jedi custom or protocol. The council looked at one another. The clone army was obviously some kind of trap by Dooku, they realized. Obi-Wan then punched Jango in the face for failing to destroy that scumbag Amidala. Having borne witness to all this, Yoda attempted to contact someone through his Vox link, an individual he referred to as the Astartes Codicia of the 13th chapter, but passed out mid-transmission, as he often did these days. Jango was arrested. Lama Su, realizing his position, spilled everything. 150 contingency orders, Order 66, kill switches, override chips. The Jedi now understood Dooku was preparing a Jedi purge. They couldn't leave this to the Republic. They would kill him themselves. Yoda awoke and declared, heretic must be cleansed. Jango said Dooku was on Geonosis, and so they went. They reached Geonosis via cloaked shuttle, slipping past orbital sensors under storm cover. Jango had spilled like a womp rat under pressure, giving up everything. Dooku's location, the spire housing the droid foundries, internal schematics, even the security schedules. No guesswork, just a clean kill route. Mace and Obi-Wan led the infiltration, threading through secondary conduits until they reached an elevated walkway above the central chamber. Below, the Separatist leadership, Dooku, Poggle the Lesser, Newt Gunray, and a cluster of Trade Federation delegates sat around a tactical array, calmly outlining troop deployments and assassination plans. Mace, watching from above, concluded this was the perfect opportunity for Yoda to both do some good and possibly find therapeutic release for his condition. He called in the others, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shaak Ti, Kit Fisto, and Brother Yoda. Once the team assembled above the chamber, Mace told Yoda the heretics below had insulted the Primarch. The details didn't matter. The insult was enough. Yoda sealed his helmet, muttered a clipped litany, and took position. All 6 Jedi leapt in unison. Obi-Wan took point, dropping first, his saber still unignited. Voice steady as he began. Hello, the... Yoda hit the table before he could finish. The impact shattered the entire structure, sending debris and Jedi scattering across the chamber. The massacre began immediately. Yoda's chainsword roared to life, shredding the first wave of droids as the Jedi stormed in behind him, sabers cleaving through metal, force strikes, pulping circuitry. But Yoda had no interest in the machines. He moved straight for the heretics. Gunray died first, his head ripped clean off by Yoda's gauntlet. Without pause, Yoda grabbed the twitching, headless corpse by the legs and slammed it into the floor with thunderous force, again and again, until it burst open in a spray of bone, organs, and blood. Poggle tried to flee and was split down the center mid-stride, intestines slapping wetly across the tiles. Yoda bellowed over the carnage, "Xeno scum, your impurity ends here it does." Sandhill of the banking clan was cleaved at the waist, his torso hurled into a wall like garbage. The others followed, limbs severed, torsos carved apart, screaming as the chainsword ripped through flesh and bone with sacred fury. When Yoda reached Wat Tambor, he paused only long enough to condemn his existence as a heresy against the machine god, muttered a prayer to the Adeptus Mechanicus, then tore him apart at the legs with his bare hands, tendons snapping, flesh ripping, blood spraying across his armor. Behind him, the Jedi finished the last of the droids. When Yoda turned, dripping in gore, the floor a red swamp beneath his feet, Dooku still hadn't moved, stunned, silent, watching the war priest advance through the carnage. They cornered Dooku. Mace stopped Yoda. He has information. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. The Jedi surrounded him, forming a circle, eyes closed, hands raised. Together, they reached out through the Force, a unified psychic spear driving into Dooku's mind. He screamed, convulsed, tried to resist, but it was hopeless. Layer by layer, thought by thought, they peeled him open. Beneath the arrogance, beneath the fear, they found the truth. His master was a hooded Sith Lord, Palpatine. After extracting all the information they needed, the Jedi released their mental probe. Dooku slumped forward momentarily, then regained his composure with a smirk. "You've learned nothing. Darth Sidious will grow more powerful than either of us," he said, his gaze shifting to Yoda. "The Jedi will fall. The Republic will rise into an empire of mankind." "An empire of mankind? It already is, heretic," Yoda said. Dooku's gaze sharpened with disgust as he looked at Yoda's armored form. "What a monstrosity you've become, old friend," he said. "Your backward way of speaking should have been the first sign you were losing your mind. Now I see it's all gone." He ignited his saber. Without a litany, Yoda's fury exploded. Lightning crackled across the chamber, slamming into Yoda's armored frame. It did nothing. If anything, it made him angrier. Yoda surged forward, roaring with fury, and slammed a gauntleted fist into Dooku's skull. The Count staggered, dazed, barely upright, before Yoda grabbed him by the legs, lifted him overhead, and smashed him into the floor. Then the chainsword came down, tearing Dooku open in a single shrieking arc. Yoda stomped on Dooku's remains one last time. Then he unsealed his helmet, wiping blood from his face, eyes wild with fanatic fervor. He raised his arms and screamed, "For the Emperor!" The Jedi raised their sabers in awkward unison. "Yeah," Kit Fisto said, barely trying. Then Yoda collapsed face first into the pile of gore that used to be Darth Tyrannus. With the droid control center secured, Mace shut down the remaining army. Across the planet, droids dropped lifelessly. The purge was complete. Before departing to Coruscant with Brother Yoda, they ordered additional Jedi forces to begin full planetary cleansing. Dooku's death had only confirmed what many of them had long suspected, that the rot in the Senate ran deeper than policy debates and tax incentives. The Sith were at the very top, but there was no tangible proof. Nothing clean enough for trial, nothing legal enough for a council-sanctioned execution. But Yoda was a different beast entirely. He wasn't a master anymore. He was a walking heresy with a chainsword. And most importantly, he was classified mentally unwell. That's when it hit Mace. A plan so stupid, so desperate, it had to work. If Palpatine died at the hands of a 10-foot-tall war-chanting gremlin in power armor, the Jedi could just plead insanity at court on his behalf. And the galaxy, ever hungry for convenient explanations, would eat it up. So the council made their way to the Chancellor's office, each keeping a careful distance as they approached. Before entering, they told Brother Yoda that Palpatine had committed a grave crime. He had accessed a data terminal without reciting the litany of activation. Yoda froze, armor humming. That alone, they said, was cause for execution. They said nothing more and let him take point. Inside his office, Palpatine already sensed the danger. Dooku's death had disturbed the Force, but even in his darkest calculations, he hadn't expected this. Yoda entered first, towering above them all, servo swearing, armor glinting in the lights. Palpatine reached for his communicator. Big mistake. Heretic, thou art. Sacred litany of comlink ignition, spoken not. Unworthy you are, Yoda said. Yoda launched forward. Before Palpatine could speak, Yoda had sliced Massa Meta in half with his chainsword, and crushed Sly Moore's skull under one armored boot. Palpatine rose, shouting, but Yoda's rage only grew. By the Omnissiah, consecrated sequence ignored, wrath of the machine spirit you incur. And then, he tore Palpatine in half, split the man from pelvis to sternum, like a faulty data slate. His remains hit the floor in wet pieces. Then, just to be sure, Yoda punched the corpse repeatedly, smashing it into the floor until it resembled something closer to Mumphy after the grass processor incident. Thus ended the Sith threat. After Palpatine's death, the matter went to court. The Jedi Council, having technically committed high treason and orchestrated a political execution, needed a scapegoat. They pleaded insanity on Yoda's behalf. No one objected. The court barely argued. The ancient war priest had shown up still covered in blood, reciting verses from a sacred manuscript no one could find, and referring to his holstered bolt pistol as the Emperor's finger. He was sentenced to temple arrest, permanent confinement within Jedi grounds. Mace addressed him with ceremonial formality. Brother Yoda, Primarch Gilliman himself commands your return to the sacred chambers. Your devotion to the Omnissiah is required to appease the machine spirits. It was a diplomatic way of returning him to the Psych ward. Yoda accepted with solemn dignity, reciting prayers to the Emperor's light as he marched back to his confinement. In the hours following Palpatine's death, before court proceedings, before public announcements, before the galaxy knew its Chancellor had fallen, Mace approached Obi-Wan. You should contact Anakin and tell him it's safe to return. Obi-Wan crossed his arms. I'd rather learn the litany of refresher purification. Mace sighed and activated his comlink. The transmission crackled through to Tatooine. Count Dooku is dead, Skywalker, Mace stated flatly. What? How, Master Windu? Anakin's voice came through, surprised. Mace's reply was simple. Master Yoda has been discharged from the Psych ward, Anakin. We discovered Dooku's plot to start a war against the Republic. Master Yoda eliminated him for this when he refused arrest. But Anakin, Yoda's condition was not cured like we thought. He had another episode and killed Chancellor Palpatine. What? Anakin's voice cracked. Palpatine? No, that's not possible. I'm afraid it is. Return to Coruscant immediately. The public doesn't even know yet. Soon after, Anakin returned to Coruscant with his half-human, half-politician hybrid companion. The two had grown very close during their brief time on Tatooine. Anakin was still visibly distraught, his eyes red from sobbing over the loss of Palpatine, whom he had considered a close friend. The Jedi were there to receive him. Obi-Wan walked up and punched Anakin directly in the face, then kicked him in the ribs before turning away. What the criff is wrong with you? Padme shouted, helping Anakin up. It was a reflex test, Obi-Wan said. A Jedi must always be able to dodge a blow. He failed. Again. I'll succeed next time, Master, Anakin said with a smile. The other Masters watched with evident disapproval, and Padme was especially angered by this treatment. Obi-Wan planned for their relationship to get Anakin expelled from the Order, but it would backfire soon enough. As Obi-Wan walked off, he heard the faint sound of Qui-Gon's laughter echoing from the Force. You'll always be a loser, Obi-Wan. You were a terrible apprentice, followed by more laughter from the netherworld. Unfortunately for Obi-Wan, Padme soon became Supreme Chancellor. It wasn't difficult. She was Naboo, like Palpatine. People liked symmetry. She was young, elegant, popular, and most importantly, not interested in robbing the treasury herself. That made her a perfect figurehead in a system full of senators who preferred stealing public funds quietly while avoiding the responsibility and visibility that came with the Chancellor's seat. Padme had connections. She knew how to use them. Within weeks, the appointment was official. Her first act as Chancellor was a meeting with the Jedi Council. She proposed the formation of a new Senate Protection Division, an elite Jedi unit assigned to oversee senatorial security. She recommended Anakin as its head. Mace hesitated until she mentioned expanded Jedi funding, relaxed oversight over Outer Rim operations, and the quiet dismissal of what she called obviously baseless accusations of Jedi involvement in Outer Rim narcotics trafficking. Mace looked around at the other Masters, and they all nodded, clearly happy. Of course, Chancellor, it shall be done immediately, he said. Anakin was knighted that evening, promoted to command, standing tall, thankful, grateful to Obi-Wan, still hopeful for that approval. Obi-Wan just stared. His hatred grew worse. But now Anakin was gone, rarely seen at the temple, spending nearly every waking hour with Padme. Obi-Wan had no outlet left for the festering resentment toward Qui-Gon. The pressure built. 2 months later, Obi-Wan's carefully maintained facade finally shattered. During a routine meditation session, he erupted into a violent tirade about Anakin's betrayal, hurling datacrons through the air with uncontrolled force bursts while constructing elaborate conspiracies about the Skywalker Amidala plot. The terrified younglings fled as he raced through the temple halls, leaving cracked pillars and shattered windows in his wake. Diagnosis: acute psychotic break with dangerous force manifestations. He was transferred to the temple psych ward, the bed beside Brother Yoda. Yoda never slept, never stopped. He simply screamed litanies day and night, reciting prayers to non-existent spirits and blessing every passing maintenance droid as a holy relic. Obi-Wan remained motionless, eyes open, staring at the ceiling while his former Grand Master screamed prayers to the machine god into the air vents.